depending on where we are physically on the key.
Yeah, and to that point, if you look at Blind Pass Park, where it's currently eroded, which is very, almost the road right there by the Blind Pass Park was undermined this last season. So all that, from the Perkins' house all the way to the north, that park is the public uses. What's happened now is that park is shrunk. And of course, we have more and more people trying to find beach in Little Beach, going further and further north, off from Little Beach, to try to find places in which they can go and have a good time. And
Right, right. Yeah, it's been, I know there's been that stretch there that's been really hit hard.
Did you answer his question when he said before homeowners or before the county makes a decision, that a number would be thrown out there? Is there an answer to that question?
It's very likely. I mean, we aren't that far yet, so I mean, I can't say definitively, but I know in the past when we had gotten to the point where we were ready to send out the final survey, and it was about that was that northern stretch I was referring to before that was so badly eroded, then all of a sudden the sand came back. We were down to the point we were going to do at that time, the last survey, where it was going to pretty much, the plan was to make it like 2 questions. And one question was, given the fact that, you know, you're likely to be assessed or responsible for X dollars, are you in support? So the initial survey, certainly not, because we're not even anywhere near close to that. I'm sorry?
That's how you did the
Siesta Key had such unanimous support, there was no need for the surveys. Correct.
When? There was only one question, when?
Yeah, and that was the question we got from virtually every homeowner on the entire key. When and how? Okay, will additional public access through existing property be required? Required, no.
We had one more question.
Oh, I'm sorry, I beg your pardon.
This presentation, otherwise, well, now let's make sure we have a question here.
I have a question.
Okay, yes, sir.
The Point of Rocks is a natural occurring place. correct?
That's correct.
For this project, is Sarasota County envisioning discussing with someone like Green Innovations out of Sarasota to build our own Point of Rocks?
No conversation like that I'm aware of.
Is it possible to do that? Because that would be a permanent solution rather than a temporary.
Well, now you're actually, when you look at what's happened south of Point of Rocks, that's a solution for the people north of there, but for the people south of there, that's what actually has caused the sand starve situation. So that's not really a solution per se. At least we've seen traditionally any structures in the coastal system ends up creating that situation. You can end up in essence bottling up sand, updrift of it, but then downdrift becomes sand starved. So you may be partially solving a problem here at the expense of creating a much greater problem here. That's what the problem with that is. Okay, so important point to make. I have never seen any beach nourishment project where there was public access required as part of the project. What ends up happening is that the more public access there is to a shoreline, the more credit you get for state funding. So, I mean, there's incentives, but there has never been a requirement on the part of the government saying, okay, Mr. Smith, we're going to go ahead and put in a public access across your property. In fact, where your swimming pool is, take that out. We're going to have public access here. Not going to happen, never has happened, won't happen. What does happen, however, as part of beach nourishment is that there are temporary construction easements that are required. And again, that really speaks to being able to put sand here, which is private property. You need to have a construction easement that allows that to happen and allows some of the equipment that may come up to shape the beach during the actual pumping of sand. And then once that's done, that's all set. Then your easement is pretty much null and void. But as far as requiring public access, no. Okay, who pays for beach nourishment? Well, really, ultimately, we all do. We pay for it through taxes. The tourists pay through it through tourist development tax. And generally speaking, there's all sorts of different funding mechanisms that can be put in place. And each project is, again, unique. It is attempted to be built on the basis of equity. And so it can be the homeowners within a project limit. It can be a tiered system. Longboat Key has 2 assessments, one for beachfront, one for non-beach people that pay for their beach management program. South Siesta Key was strictly the homeowners that were within the project limits, that were Gulf front, not on the bay. It's done different ways, different places, and the policymakers make that decision, and every effort is made to make it as equitable as possible. And that's about as much as really we can say at this point. If a project ever was developed on Manasota Key, all of those things would be looked at in terms of where is the public access, what's the public benefit, how much is being contributed from tourist development tax, et cetera, et cetera. And then those decisions would be made. Impossible at this point to try to throw out any funding dynamics or a funding plan. That would be part of that process if we were to go forward with the Manasota Key project.
Larry,
Yes, sir.
How long was that project at Siesta Key?
About 2 miles.
2 months.
Yeah, about 2 miles.
Is that paid by the homeowner over a period of time?
They have the option, David. They have their assessment. They can pay it up front, and then there are no, I guess for lack of a better word, interest charges associated. They have the option of paying up to 7 years as part of their property tax, but then there is an interest rate that's assessed as part of that. So it's their option. Okay, history of beach nourishment. There has not on Manasota Key in Sarasota County, none of the unincorporated areas, which is the whole key in Sarasota County, has had beach nourishment. Okay, benefits. Really boils down really quickly to storm protection, because you're moving your point of erosion from close to your home out further into the Gulf. Storm protection, aesthetics, and recreational benefits, and those things all end up equating to an increase in property value. So to the homeowner, in terms of dollars and cents, the benefit is increased property values. In terms of the benefits of a beach, storm protection, recreational, and aesthetic benefits.
Larry, don't you basically reduce the property value too, though, by having now a public beach out in front of you where they can camp and put up the towel and have food?
Well, all I can say is it certainly hasn't been the case in any of the beach nourishment areas that have been studied. It hasn't been the case on Siesta as well.
But you guys had a really great thing when you came up with the wet sand, dry sand. That
Mhm.
really works because you can see it. You
Still
can't
the
see what
case.
the 18-year mean high water line is. Because it may well be out in the water.
Mhm.
But when you can talk to people about the wet sand is you're reversing back and forth,
Mhm.
the dry sand is about the earth product. That works well, and now you've got to throw that out.
Well, I mean, it is true that creates, when you've got a beach nourishment project, there's some dry sandy beach that's publicly owned. That's true.
That's the problem.
Okay, and also, it is, yes, Pat.
Well, I see 2 things on there that I just don't think are right. I don't think it increases property value, I think it diminishes. First of all, when we talk about Manasota Key, you're gonna have to talk about barrier island. I can't.
Nobody can hear you. Speak loud enough to follow.
When I don't think the first increased property value, I think it just does the opposite. It diminishes it. nourishment? Well, we bring the sand up and we put it to protect your homes. And he should have said to temporarily protect. We're talking about all the money we could have to shell out because we're constantly shifting more than CSP and other places. We might be having to shell out every 3 years a bunch of money for this to keep everybody protected on a key that shifts accretion and addition, sand coming in, sand going out. So for me, I came here because, and other people come to visit our beach because of its natural, pristine quality. We have wildlife on that beach. It's there. Other beaches are sterile. The sand is sterile coming in.
Okay, well, that actually serves as a good segue, Pat, to our next slide.
And another thing, I think it does not interfere with natural processes. I think it does interfere. I've been researching this. I've lived here 11 years full time on Minnesota Beach. And I have lots of good information that says that it destroys the natural quality of the beach. And even the way the water comes in and goes out, the flow in and out, it absolutely destroys the natural system. And it does. And it keeps doing it. Okay, I won't see anyone out there at your show.
Okay, and that's,
Tomorrow, and I'll tell you about all that.
and so just for real quick clarification, as you mentioned, Pat, there are certainly short-term impacts to natural resources from beach nourishment. Our next slide, we're going to talk about that for a moment. But this is, the point made here is, as compared with, as an alternative, seawalls and rocks. Beach nourishment has a much more natural storm protection ability than does rocks and seawalls. And that was the point made there. And the next point is some of the issues that people need to be aware of going in. And one of the things is that certainly, especially after initial placement of sand, it can erode faster than a natural beach. Storms, of course, will influence the performance of the project. And there is this large recurring expense. Pat was starting to hit on that issue. Now, it would be rare to actually say 3 years, but the point is that there is a period of time where anytime you start with a beach nourishment project, it does need to be maintained because you haven't changed that erosion. I mean, think about that for a second. We haven't done anything that changes the actions of Mother Nature. But what we have done is with beach nourishment, you've moved that point where it's eroding from further out in the Gulf. What does that do? You've bought time. You didn't change the fact that it's eroding. Mother Nature's going to change by herself if it becomes accreting. That can happen. But the point is, if you've got an eroding shoreline, you do beach nourishment, you still have an eroding shoreline. But now, instead of starting from this point that's dangerously close to your home, it's out here. So again, that buys you some time. But that means that periodically, you're going to have to then come back and re-nourish. Because as that erosion takes place, the sand is carried away. You have to come back out. Now, different areas, it's different. We did our first nourishment, as it turns out, 8 years after well, actually, we've completed it 9 years, which is unusual, but we were doing the bulk of the project 8 years after the first nourishment was completed. Now, what we also see around the state of Florida is as areas have beach nourishment programs, that interval slowly but surely for each nourishment gets a little bit longer. Because what happens is the sand that's placed then ends up becoming, well, sort of more naturalized. It's not exactly, but the point is it becomes stable in place, the core of it. And so each time you're renourishing, you're adding more sand, doing fill, spot fill, and then it becomes a longer period of time. However, make no mistake, to be totally fair about this, when storms hit, that changes the whole dynamic. You get hit by a major storm, and that changes that whole period and frequency. However, on the other hand, I'm giving you good news, bad news, point, counterpoint, because that's what you need to hear, is as much of the information as you can. When a storm hits and gobbles up that sand that you placed out there as beach nourishment, well, that has now become the storm protection, the sacrificial sand that it was intended to be. So instead of the storm gobbling up your roads and your home, it's gobbling up that sand that you placed out there for beach nourishment. Yes, ma'am.
I've been here about 40 years, and I have seen the sand come and go all the time. So you mean, what's made it all change? Development, all the development, or what is it that's made it change? What all the same?
Well, you know, it hasn't necessarily changed. In some areas, people are seeing more serious erosion than they have seen before. So that could be a change. But the sand does come, and it has gone, historically on Manasota Key.
Many times.
Now, the fact that the erosion has gotten in deeper than people have seen before, there could be reasons for that. It could be that there has been more development on the barrier island than there was before, because anytime you have structures that contact wave energy, you actually accelerate the amount of sand erosion. So that's possible, but yes, that's that way I tried to describe the undulating shoreline on Manasota. There has been slugs of sand that slowly move through time, north to south, and the areas that were eroding become accreting, and the ones that were accreting become eroding for that same reason. Yes, I don't know who was first.
I heard that in Charlotte County that the natural shelf that's supposed to be protecting Manasota Key has been worn down. Is that true?
I don't believe that's true, and I haven't really seen a protective shelf per se. They have some offshore hard bottom, which is some natural outcroppings of rocks that have actually become exposed. The erosion that's occurred in that portion that Michael Poff, and you'll have a chance if you come tomorrow, Michael Poff will be actually presenting about their situation, and that has become uncovered by sand so that it becomes more evident through time. This lady first.
I was wondering if they've done any studies about the groins of capricins that put out, that go out, and they're not natural rock formation.
Right.
But they do have to have an effect down.
They do, yes. Anytime you have,
Why don't they remove those? Don't you think that would be helpful?
unfortunately, nothing is ever real easy in the coastal system, because what happens is when you start changing, it's true, you're going to solve the problem of retaining sand if you have rocks that are out there in the system.
Well, it hasn't really done a good job of Casperson, but certainly.
They're pretty much, they're somewhat derelict structures by now. So if there was going to be a beach nourishment project on Casperson, there's at least a fairly decent chance the state would ask the county to remove the rocks as part of the project.
It would be a good idea.
Who else had you had a hand up there, Andy.
I'm from Charlotte County, just to let everybody know. The hard bottom that has been exposed down into the Gulf, out of the estimated $26 million that we're looking at for the Charlotte County side, about $7 million of that is for mitigation, where we will have to rebuild the Tamiami limestone hard bottom back out in the Gulf of Mexico, because once it's exposed, it becomes a protected area. The other thing that's very important is that once you establish beach renourishment, you now have a term called the engineered beach. And that qualifies you when, let's say we have a major storm that comes through, then FEMA comes in, declares it an emergency area, and they automatically pick up 80% of the renourishment cost at that time. And I hope we can get into this together.
Very good. All right, thank you for your comment. And just to finish off this slide real quick, large recurring expense for the renourishments. Again, it's part of what Pat was talking about a little bit. Short-term impacts, certainly, for various natural resources, even areas such as sea turtle nesting, shorebird nesting, and some of the microfauna and flora that live in the sand itself. However, the other side of that coin is that longer term, you are creating, however, where there wasn't before, nesting habitat for sea turtles and shorebirds and so forth. But the initial short-term impact when you first place the sand, the compaction is different. Sometimes the temperature caused by the color of the sand can be different. So there are short-term impacts. Longer term, you actually see now the creation of habitat where there was none before. And then construction easements is an issue just to be aware of. Each homeowner is asked to sign an easement, a temporary easement for that period during construction to enable the project to go forward. And as far as approvals, it is something I wouldn't want to put my worst enemy through, quite frankly. It is an arduous process, but there's a good reason for it. And it's really what we've been kind of talking around all evening tonight. And that is that the coastal system is so fragile and so complex and so important and so valuable that the feds, the state, the county needs to have as much protection in place as possible to make sure that as we undertake these man-made projects, that we aren't throwing things too terribly badly out of whack. And that's really the basis of it. But it becomes an amazing process of attempting to gain the permits and the authorizations. A new project very commonly can take upwards of 3 years to go through the permitting. And that's not uncommon. It's actually expected. Now, the good news is that when you get to your renourishment, if you haven't changed your template very much, if you haven't changed your project that you did the first time, you can usually get through this a whole lot quicker. I wouldn't say quite easier, but it's, and again, I just throw as examples to give you a frame of reference context. For South Siesta Key, we were able to do the permitting for the renourishment in about a year. So that was certainly much faster. But the initial permitting that we underwent for South Siesta, which was a fairly straightforward project, was over 3 years in permitting. And that's both state and federal, and each of those two, they call them kind of permits, but they are joint complex permits. They require the review of numerous agencies at the state level and at the federal level before you get the okay to go forward with a project. And again, that's to ensure that we're not throwing things out of whack, we're not burying delicate and important hard bottom and reefs, and we're not destroying the native habitat, we're not throwing off the natural processes of the sand movement, on and on and on, that goes into that permitting. So a realistic timeline you're looking at for a new project starting from scratch, you're going to go upwards of 3 years for the permitting. The actual sand pumping, the construction of the project, is anywhere from 3 to 6 months. So after you've gone through that process of getting all of your authorizations, your actual sand pumping time goes really pretty quickly. And how long will nourishment last? Well, we've seen from area to area, your renourishment intervals can vary from 5 to 15 years. We managed to hit 9. That's true. Pat was only 3 is very close to 5. That's true. But there are areas that just out of the sheer economics of it, 5 would be very unusual because you're coming up with significant funding again for the renourishment. So that pushes incentive-wise those intervals out a little bit more because it takes a while to build up the funding. Charles first and then you.
Quick question. Do you know about how much each property owner paid for this renourishment in dollars, CSD?
Well, all I can tell you is it widely varied, and that's because it was a mixed bag between condo owners, single-family home owners, and there was a...
$1,000 a person, or
No, it was... We had some of the homeowners who were significantly more than that, significantly more.
a year? Or?
In total. So we're finally actually to the, oh, I'm sorry, you had a question. I beg your pardon.
I'm sorry, but my age, I just forgot my question.
See, that happens to me all the time, I can tell you. Okay, very good. Please feel free to ask, and I'm sorry I overlooked you when you raised your hand. Yeah, I'm glad to see there's somebody else like me. That's good.
Wait so long to ask this question.
Yeah. Okay. This is just to remind you, we are doing Monday, January 9th at 3 p.m. We tried to hit different times because we weren't sure what was most convenient. We tried evening, we got a morning, we got a mid-afternoon, so we'll see what kind of turnout we get. But the other news to tell you about is that this fine gentleman in the back here has been video recording this information, so people who can't make it to any of the meetings will be able to bring this up, not immediately, but give us a few days to get it ready, but they'll be able to actually bring up the video of this public workshop and watch it from the comfort of their own homes in their bunny slippers or whatever they're wearing, and they'll be able to get that exact same information, because again, our intent is to provide the same information and have questions and answer sessions for each of those next 2 workshops. We want to try to get as much information out as we can to the most number of people, and so that's why we have set those up. And those both will occur at the Lemon Bay Park Nature Center. We tried to again locate relatively convenient for Manasota Key residents instead of, having it in downtown Sarasota or something. Yes, sir.
Does the project like this have any negative or positive effect on the red tide?
Interesting question. There have been some studies that have been done, and there hasn't been direct correlation, but there has been certain people suspect that there may be some correlation in some cases. And I won't say more than that because I don't think that it's ever been conclusive, but there are folks that believe that mostly it's from the process of bringing up the submerged sand that may have been deposited for some time offshore and bringing that into the nearshore area. But that is only a hypothesis. There hasn't been a direct correlation to my knowledge. Yes, David.
Part of the other side of all of this discussion is if you're a homeowner who's 2 feet away from water coming into your foundation, then you have a problem. So what other remedies are available to a homeowner whose property is about to be damaged significantly, other than beach renourishment?
Well, the unfortunate answer is there aren't a whole lot of options for people because, again, you're in the coastal area. It's very, very difficult. We do have emergency variances that can be applied for that allow for, on a temporary basis, things like sandbags to stave off a very temporary situation, an emergency situation. There are permits and variances that can be applied for structures or other remedies, but what we have found over and over and over again is that once again, anytime you start going towards structures, you may be partially solving one problem, but you're exacerbating other problems, and in fact, beyond that, you're possibly exacerbating problems on your neighbor's property as well, or even downdrift further. So there's no easy answer. There are things that you can apply for. There are dune restoration projects that you can, but I don't want to tout those so much because, we've seen over and over, folks have spent a good deal of money and brought in sand for a dune restoration and seen that sand, because that's very different than beach nourishment. That's a much, much smaller localized portion of sand, and they've seen that sand disappear within weeks, a couple months. And structures, you can, even if you go through the process of getting approvals for structures, you're still going to end up with possible greater problems down the line. You're going to get problems for your neighbors, and And you may not even get approved for the structures in the first place after having gone through some expense. So there's no easy answers. I mean, I can't sugarcoat it. There aren't any magic wands out there where people can get quick help just like that, other than on an emergency basis, you can do sandbags and you can do emergency temporary structures under certain cases if you get state authorization. But longer term, you're pretty much crossing your fingers in the sky.
So just a follow-up to that. You've been around for a bit of time.
1921. It was spring.
In your short-term memory, let's say the last 10 years, how many homes have been permanently condemned on the barrier islands because they've been breached and are unable to do anything to fix the problem?
2 that I'm aware of. 2 that I'm aware of. In Sarasota County, correct. Both on Siesta Key. Yes, sir.
As I understand it, I'm a homeowner on the Minnesota Key.
Uh-huh.
The Gulf side.
Okay.
So that's one type of property owner. Now, is that the only one we're talking about? Because we have the bay side, and then we have a third one. And the third one is the bay side property that also has an easement to the Gulf.
Very good point. We tried to actually capture that information on our survey because we were asking about those kinds of things to be able to vet out what the support level was for the different situations.
But what I'm trying to understand is, since I'm on the Gulf side, would I have to pay for the beach and the guys with the easement, they don't have to pay? And
Well,
the guy on the other side of the street that doesn't have an easement?
has not been determined yet. That would be a possibility, though, that would be the case. But there might also be an assessment. I mean, that would be one of those funding plan decisions that would be made by the policymakers as to who would pay. Yes.
The total number of properties on Minnesota Key
Yes.
that are affected by erosion currently. What is that number? What is your total number of homes and then the total number affected by erosion?
I don't have that number. Actually, we probably will have a pretty good idea of that number when the surveys come back, to be honest with you.
So you're depending on the people giving you the survey to determine whether they're...
Well, now, we did a study that we released fairly recently, so you could go through that, or one of us could, and you could look to see where those erosion areas are. And what we haven't done yet, or at least that I haven't done yet, now I don't know if any of our folks in our office have done that kind of data analysis yet, but you could look at the areas that are currently eroded and count homes. You could do that, even with the study we already did.
You need that data analysis so that, you more accurately can reflect what it is you're dealing with.
Well, if there were going to be a project developed, there'd be that and a whole lot more of data that would be developed.
It could also be fluid by your own admission because it's undulating movement
Correct.
on that.
That's correct.
So you have a moving target.
It is a moving target, no doubt. You remembered your question.
Well, a different question.
Okay.
But very much valuable here, I think. Sarasota County, I think it was in the 80s, allowed for rock revetment intermittently on the island.
Well,
And
no.
therefore, the people that are suffering now are those that are outside the border of that revetment.
There were, beginning in 1979, when the ordinance came into effect, any rock revetments or other structures required a variance that was authorized by the Board of County Commissioners. So if folks got authorization in the 80s for structures, they went before the Board of County Commissioners to get approval for a variance. That would be the case today. If someone wanted to apply for a structure, they would have to get a variance from the Board of County Commissioners.
My point is, it was done intermittently.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't permitted entirely. It wasn't insisted
Right.
on. If it wasn't done entirely, you can't do it. That attitude didn't exist. The attitude was, if you want it, you do it. If you don't want it, you don't. I don't care what happens to your neighbors. That was the attitude of the county then.
Well,
And that's what
that's,
when we're suffering now.
Yeah.
The areas that you're calling severe erosion are the outskirts of that rebank?
There are definitely effects from structures that cause erosion.
I know for a fact that's true.
Yeah.
I'm wondering.
You had your hand up too.
Yes, first I want two comments.
Okay.
Thank you very much. It was very informative. I appreciate it.
Good, I'm glad. Thank you.
Secondly, don't hold it against me, when I'm from New Jersey, and they have built jetties up and down the coast, and now they're saying that those jetties are the worst thing they could have done.
Well, you can look at Venice Inlet and you can see,
Creating problems.
yeah, created huge problems, yeah.
But here's my final question. And
Okay.
I don't quite understand, it seems like the horse is before the cart. You did this study, you showed by monument where the erosions and the accretions took place. It's very clear from the study. Why isn't the next step, well, here's the dollars that it's going to cost to, whether the homeowners want it or not, because it's an issue of public safety, here's what it's going to cost to re-nourish the beaches. We know where the critically eroded areas are. Here's what it's going to cost. Then the next step is, do the homeowners want to do it, and who's in favor, who's not.
Well, I understand your point. I mean, you feel, and I get that. I mean, if a person may answer the question differently if they knew how much they were going to be assessed. It's a chicken and egg problem, though, because until you're actually able to get to the point where you start to develop a project, it's pretty impossible to really do with any confidence. Well, even ballparks, when you're talking about whether or not the homeowners are, what percentage they're going to pay, what percentage of the total project, that kind of thing, it's very, very
But there
difficult.
are people who have gained 63 feet of beach in the last 10 years. And that stretch of people would say, well, if it's going to cost me X, I'm in favor of doing it for the whole beach. But if it's going to cost me Y, count me out.
Let's, there's a couple more slides and information about
Oh,
the
I thought
survey.
we were done.
And so if we could just get to those and then.
Okay.
One last question I can, but it's not a, it's just real short.
Okay.
Comment to what you said here about this man over here said, well, you know, what can you do to someone who's having a problem? And then you mentioned a lot of things. One you didn't mention is what my friend and I saw. We walked from the public beach, Minnesota Beach, south, all the way past the Pearl. And when we got everything looked real good. I've been here for 11 years full time on the beach all the time. We came up to like about 3 or 4 houses. Somebody may be here. And their sandbanks looked like they were starting to be in trouble. And they had these huge boulders packed in, they looked kind of natural. And I said to my friend, I think they probably got together and they saw they were having problems, and they must have gotten either the county to bring these boulders in, or not. Anyway, he shot pictures. He's a professional photographer. And we went down and we shot just to have every single house, 2 miles beyond the Pearl Motel, a mile beyond that. Didn't get down to Howard Waters' house, though. Didn't get that far, almost Howard. That's where all the damage is. And that is where the damage is, I know. So we know what's going on pretty much. But anyway, I wondered about those boulders. Did they get them permitted? Because maybe they were doing some good. It looked like their banks were, and I thought they kind of got together and got those boulders brought in and did that.
Yeah, it all depends on when they were put in. They either, if they were relatively recent, then that would have been under a variance from the board to do that.
Yeah, somebody did that.
Here's the information that Rachel referenced about the surveys. They're out now. We're asking everyone to please complete them and return them. And by all means, though, get the information you need, either through attending one of these workshops, asking questions, give one of us, the staff people, a call, ask questions that way. Anything that you need in order to answer your survey, we are here to provide if we possibly can, and we'd be happy to. We're trying to get the surveys in by January 31st, so, from right now, you've got close to 2 months to do that, but, please do get involved, get the information that you'd like, or call and have conversations, dialogue, whatever you'd like. There is the website here. You can pick, at that website, you can get the facts that were provided here at the back of the room, the staff erosion report, a recording of tonight's meeting once it's ready and it gets posted. You'll be able to watch that. So, you know, we're trying to get as much information out as we can between the website and then, again, encouraging your participation with the surveys. And we will compile and analyze those results, break them down again in accordance with, as the point that Charles was making, we're going to vet out the different kinds of situations and, you know, bayside versus Gulf side and locations of erosion areas versus non-erosion areas. Those kinds of things that we're going to try to do that data analysis and break down the results in that manner. And here's our contact information. The three of us are all here tonight. And I guess at this point we can either handle a couple more additional questions, and Charles has one right off the bat. And then if you'd like also, we can, even after the meeting, if you have questions afterwards, we can hang around for a few minutes and talk to you then. So Charles, you had your hand up, and then this lady here after you.
Can you clarify, and I don't remember, you may have covered that in the mailings that you had out, people that are really not here at this point in time or can't come to one of these workshops because of whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Did you say in that mailing if you can see a workshop televised and go to hear?
Do we have that in the mailing?
Is
Do you
that
know,
in the
Rachel?
mailing? Because I would strongly
Is it
suggest-
listed? Okay, someone else is saying that they did see that listed.
Okay, as long as it's there, that's great.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I think maybe another mailing where it would say, hey, if you can't go to this workshop,
Then watch it online.
please watch it
Yeah.
before you fill out the
Okay.
survey.
Fair enough.
Get a better read.
Okay, I think this lady had her hand, and then Pat.
What if people that we contact us and say they didn't get the survey? How should that be handled as the homeowners association?
Okay, you can certainly let us know. And as I think Rachel was mentioning to me also, now there were some of the mailing addresses that we had that were more remote, that were like not on Manasota Key. And so there may be some extra time in the transferring, you know, by the time they get to that address and then get forwarded down to where the folks are. There may be just a time delay, but ultimately we want everybody to be included. If someone did not get a survey, we will make sure that they get a survey.
But given that you're going to ask the address anyway, right?
Right.
Certainly the homeowners association can take your survey, PDF it, and they can fill that out and send it in as well. It doesn't need to be, quote, the official survey, does it?
You can do that too. I mean, we send it out to everybody, you can have it, if there's copies here, we can send it again.
There you go. That's true, because it's tied to the address. So yeah, we would just count one per address. That's all.
Don't send me two, because I'll get confused.
Yeah. We're trying to pad the ballot box with, yes.
Just real quick, before everybody goes, and I'm going to stand by the door and you can look at it as you go out. I've got these pictures of what it looks like, your beaches, our beaches are going to look like. I'm going to be by the door, you can see them. And you can see all the heavy equipment, you can see people. Look carefully, here's people, here's all this going on. Here's where you can see this. You can see it on YouTube. Just Google YouTube, Sharkies on the Pier, Venice Beach. That's where this, not long ago either, I don't know, last year, this year, but it's there, and you know, you get the added fun and benefit of hearing all the noises, and you really should go there.
But it doesn't last forever.
But the noises go on and they go on, but it seems like it lasts forever.
Yeah, but how close do you live to the beach? How close is your water coming into your house?
Well, okay, and I do know how you feel because my house is right on the sea.
Okay, so Pat, you're going to have that back there for people to look at? Okay, very good.
But a Sharpie, if you want to really see the whole thing, it's about a 10-minute video.
Okay, well, our program is about to wrap up. Is there any final questions people have? Yes, Michael.
Yeah, just one on state funding. I think I read recently the state only has a little over $30 million a year for beach erosion for the entire state of Florida.
Yeah, it's become very competitive, yeah.
And so I guess my question is, it must be very competitive.
Yeah.
Is there anything we can do to lobby the state? Because it seems like that's really not going to happen.
If you have connections with legislators who can raise that ceiling, that would be fantastic. But yeah, we're given, at least under the current situation where it's coming in at roughly 30 million a year, it falls way short of the
And I guess
demand.
that's one of the benefits of joining Charlotte County, because now we have two counties trying to get this money from the state.
Well, that is true. The collaborative projects actually garner greater points in the ranking system of the state. But yes, it is what used to be an automatic state funding at the time we did our first nourishment is far from automatic now. It's very competitive. You really have to scramble for everything you can get.
Larry,
Yes.
is this whole thing just putting a Band-Aid on a much bigger problem of global warming and rising tide levels? I mean,
Well, there certainly are global level issues on this planet that you're right, we're not going to affect. But what this is actually is an effort, if folks want to go there, it's an effort that it's a stand that you can take that buys you some time and gives you a chance to do some shoreline management in the interim. But no, we're not going to change what's happening in the planet.
they
That's
talk
true.
about Miami being underwater.
Yes.
At some point.
Yeah.
It is a serious long-term problem.
It is. There's no doubt. Especially for those of us on a long, narrow peninsula. Yes, very, very much so. Well, I want to thank all of you so much for your attention, and really appreciate that so very much.